Okay, unfinished business, rate analysis of water and sewer for city customers.
I guess it's up to me to bring the mood
There comes the party.
Here's Kelly.
Bring us down.
There is a lot of detail in this memo, and I would like to avoid reading it word for word, but a lot of it is almost gonna have to be to convey that information out to the public. At the April 15th, 2013 City Council meeting, Council directed staff to evaluate and provide options and suggestions for water and sewer rate increases to meet a portion of the capital needs in the water and sewer infrastructure. To accomplish this, staff developed a series of spreadsheets where various scenarios could be run and the impact to the customers evaluated. The basis of the spreadsheets is as follows. The City of Alpena has certain annual costs within the water and sewer utilities. These annual costs are the operation and maintenance of the water production plant and water recycling plant, as well as the water distribution and sewage collection system. The per 1,000 gallon costs are based on total operation and maintenance costs divided by the annual projected sales of 300,000 gallon units of water and 306,000 gallon units for sewer. Per the analysis provided by Gosling Zubek, the operation and maintenance costs for water was at $3.33 per thousand and $3.23 per thousand for sewer. Now when they calculated that, basically what they did is credited all of our contracted water sales as an offset to that. Not a real true picture of what our O&M costs were. If that contracted sales of water went away or was reduced, it really fluctuates the O&M costs, or the per thousand gallon calculation of O&M costs. So what we did is we took and calculated what our actual O&M costs were for water and sewer. Those calculated out to be $5.23 per thousand for water and $5.26 for sewer. The utilities also have incurred debt, which must be paid for. Gosling Zubek calculated rates for debt service at $1.36 per thousand gallons for water and $1.26 per thousand gallons for sewer. Now they were looking at past track history of the utilities. Since we had gone through the budget process, and as part of the budget process, we were projecting out 3 years. It gave us a good handle on using not only our current year, our projected 13-14, but also 14-15 and 15-16 to do that. So we used those, and we calculated out these debt service costs at $1.31 per thousand gallons for water, and $1.28 per thousand gallons for sewer. All that said, right now the O&M costs and debt per thousand gallons of water is $13.08 per thousand gallons. So we take our O&M for water, O&M for sewer, debt for water, debt for sewer, we add those together. It's $13.08 per thousand gallons. Right now, and this is the projected 13-14 rates that we've inserted into the budget, is $9.17. So even with the rates that we've projected out for this next year, and those included a 10% increase for water and sewer, we're not even covering our O&M and debt. The annual capital needs is established within the Gosling Zubek study. They're established at approximately $3,600,000 to take the utilities from basically no capital funding, which we have right now, to $3,600,000 annually. It can be done, but with extreme impact to our customers. The capital needs and the various funding scenarios were discussed by staff. It was our opinion that whatever funding scenario is ultimately chosen, that the following criteria must be utilized. The impact to all customers, be it residential, commercial, or industrial customers, must be reviewed and evaluated. Staff would select a minimum capital funding level as the basis for any rate increase. In other words, we knew that $3.6 million was not doable and still have our residents able to pay the bills. So we were going to select something less. Any additional proposed increases towards achieving the ultimate capital need would be spread out over a multi-year program, allowing the customers advance notice of the proposed increases. So even if we start at 20% level, if we ever want to achieve that 100%, it was going to be over time and with enough advance notice so people could prepare. The capital portion of the ready to serve charge would be correlated to the customer's meter size, with larger metered customers paying a higher ready to serve capital charge. And a capital commodity charge, if and when assessed, would also be incorporated into the rates, whereby the larger users would pay a proportional share of the capital needs based on the volumes used. And I say in there, if and when assessed, through the various scenarios that I ran, we did have a capital commodity charge so that every 1,000 gallons people used, there was some amount that was dedicated towards capital. At this point in time, putting anything into that really drove the rate increases to the citizens up. So at this time, we backed that out to zero. So there is no capital commodity charge. Per the Gosling-Zubek report, the city should attain a capital level of funding of approximately $3.6 million annually. As stated, a rate increase to achieve this is unrealistic at this time, but should be a target level to achieve in the future. To establish the funding for capital improvements, staff has selected a funding level of $1.5 to $1.75 million to achieve this. Once this level of funding was determined, the information was entered into the spreadsheets and the variable costs adjusted to try and balance out the impact to the customers while achieving the desired funding level. Once again, the city has annual costs for operation and maintenance and debt, which must be maintained and are for the most part set. To achieve capital funding desired, we have two variables within the calculations by which to generate that funding. These are a ready-to-serve charge and a commodity capital charge. And as I stated previously, in putting a capital commodity charge in there, just the rates, the percentage increase to the customers really went up dramatically. The implementation of a ready-to-serve charge is more than normal in rate making than our present minimum bill scenario. It establishes the cost to the utility for the capability for each property to be connected and water and sewer ready to use at the turn of a tap or the flush of a toilet. In evaluating rate making necessary to provide the recommended funding levels, we evaluated other communities to determine their ready-to-serve charge based on meter sizing. The ready-to-serve charges established in our scenarios are below the averages of these other communities. In evaluating the ready-to-serve charges, the large users and changes made to their rates had minimal impact on the funding generated due to the low number of these customers in relation to the residential customers. We obviously have far fewer. We have over 4,000 residential meters and less than 700 larger metered customers. So it takes a lot more change in the larger metered customers to try to achieve that same end result. So we didn't do a lot of changes. We set those larger metered customers at what we felt was a comfortable level, and then worked with the residentials as the primary fluctuation point in establishing our needed funding. Thus, in evaluating the rate surcharge, the larger users and changes made to their rates had minimal impact on the funding generated due to the low numbers of these customers in relation to the residential customers. Thus, a minor change in the ready-to-serve charge spread over all customers per month had more significant impact on the funding generated overall by the ready-to-serve charge portion of the rate making. In the various scenarios that we ran, the ready-to-serve charges for the larger meter customers were held constant as they are limited in number. Increases in the ready-to-serve charges to them has minimal impact to the overall capital, and ready-to-serve charges for the larger meter customers have already been increased. So we already took those up to what we felt was a comfortable level, and again, those are below what the average of other ready-to-serve charge customers for comparable meters in other communities were at. The residential customers are those with meters less than 1 inch. Ready-to-serve charges will run through the scenarios at varying costs. In running these various scenarios, it was determined that at this time, we would not implement a commodity charge per 1,000 gallons of usage. When this was utilized, the increases of customers, expressed as a percentage of their current bill, increased dramatically and were, in our opinion, beyond the current customer's ability to absorb at this time. In the scenarios that were developed, the ready-to-serve charge for residential customers, those with 1 inch meters or less, ran from $10 per month to $16.42 per month. This would not include any usage by the customer, and they would only be billed for the water they actually used. Under our present scenario, with 6,000 gallons of usage per quarter, and they're basically given that in their minimum bill, we have a number of customers that question why they're paying for 6,000 gallons when they're not even using 3,000 gallons. So in making these changes, we felt that we would take it right back to zero, keep the minimum bill down, but then the residents would be billed for water consumed. To evaluate the impact to the customers, United Water provided past billings for the 10 largest customers. These were then incorporated into the spreadsheet along with minimum use customers and average use customers to calculate out the proposed billings for each scenario. The proposed billings were then compared to the previous billings, either actual or calculated, depending on use. The attached spreadsheet titled Customer Use and Cost Comparison for each ready-to-serve rate tested shows these calculations and comparisons. I'm going to jump up to spreadsheet really quickly, and I know this is going to be kind of small for the audience to see. I just picked, and all I want to do is I want to take and just explain some of the scenario here and then go into the impact. And it's labeled large user impact, but it's look at all the users. This happens to be based on a $6 per water and sewer ready-to-serve charge for residential customers. It should be the $12. The ready-to-serve charge would generate about $679,000 per year. The large meter customers are the ones below that, $47,000 for the 1 to 2 inch meters, $11,000, almost $12,000 for the 2 to 3, $2,300 for the 3 inch meters, $11,200 for the 4 inch, and $6,200 for the 6 inch meters. As can we see, there's very limited number of larger customers. That's why they have minimal impact. We talked about the O&M costs. And this is where they're calculated out. This is the revenue that is generated by charging the O&M costs against the water and sewer volume sold. You know, we're going to generate $3,180,482, and our O&M expenses for a year are $3,180,483. We're covering our expenses. The same thing with our debt. We're going to generate about 783, well, we're gonna generate exactly the same amount, the exact amount to cover our debt. So there is no additional money. The O&M cost and the debt retirement is only covering that portion of it. We have increased the billing service charge with this, and even if we remain where we're at, we would be looking at going to a monthly billing system. So what I did is I asked Mike Lewinsky from United Water to put together the costs, what it's costing us right now for the billing system, and what we would pay to have them go to a monthly bill. There's obviously additional increases. We have more customers coming in, we have more billings going out per month. So Mike has done that, and before we charged $5.67 as a billing charge per quarter. Now we'd be looking at about $3.34 per month per customer for a billing charge. So there is an increase there, but it's those additional services. We're also, and I just point this out, it's not in the memo, but we are looking at other alternatives for possibly reducing that, possibly partnering up on some billing to make that even more cost effective. Bottom line out of all this, our contracted sales, about $1.25 million. The revenue generated from our O&M, from our ready-to-serve charges, our debt service is going to generate about almost $6 million. These are our estimated expenses. This is an average over the next 4 years, the current year plus the next 3. Brings us to a total of, total expenses of about $4.3 million per year, giving us about $1.6 million for capital. All this other revenue, that is basically our trucked in waste, our septage, and that is flexible. There's talk about the trucked in waste possibly going away. We wanted to keep it separated out. So we're looking at, under this scenario, with $6 per utility per month ready-to-serve charge, we would generate about $1,786,000 available for capital. Now, with each one of these, we also generated a large user impact. Looking at our 10,000 gallon customer, which is an average customer, that was the same thing that Gosley Zuback used. $12 commodity charge, the monthly billing charge, debt service, and O&M. We have a cost per quarter, and all I did was I just equated these out per quarter so that we could have a good comparison. The per quarter equivalent would be $176.82, where the current customer is paying $97.46, about an 81% increase in their rates. That's with the 6. We also did this scenario for a $5, $5.50, 6, and then an $8.21 ready-to-serve charge. Summarizing those, residential customer user charge, the revenue generated by the ready-to-serve, revenue generated by the O&M, contracted and other revenue, the total revenue, our total expenses, and the funding available for capital. And as can be seen, at $5, and it makes, makes sense at $5 we have about $1.66 million available for capital. As this goes up, we generate more money available for capital. At $8.21, we generate about $2 million available for capital. Again, proposed monthly bill for each of those scenarios, average use cost for each one of those customers, our current cost per quarter, and this is the percent increase that the average use customer, 10,000 gallon per quarter customer would see. This ranking, and this was something that was referenced in the Gosley-Zubek study. This is a chart that they pulled out that they had in their presentation. What this does is this looks at sample quarterly water and sewer rate billings. City of Alpena is presently up here. We're number 2. That's why we don't have any capital. In looking at these various scenarios, when I put the ranking in there at 13, 14, 15, you know, at $5 we're ranked about 13, which puts us somewhere in between Tawas and Elk Rapids. Still cheaper than Sault Ste. Marie, Rogers City, Onaway, Petoskey, St. Ignace, Silver Springs, but we are more expensive than some of the other communities.
We should note too that I don't know when those were last updated, so we would be giving very current rates. We don't know what those others are. They may be higher now because of annual adjustments that they make, and I'm not sure what the date is on those.
I know that he updated them between his initial report last January and his presentation, so they were in the spring, but I don't know if all of the customers have changed their rates since then. And again, like I said, depending on the residential customer use charge and our ranking and the percent increase. Now the other one is the large use customers. And again, we'll go back to the $6 large use. And I know Jane and Ray are right here, so, you know, and when I said Mike picked our 10 largest, Ton of Suds was not one of those, but we did include them because they have expressed a lot of concern. And I apologize, you should have got 2 new spreadsheets at your desk tonight. Sam found where I had erred in my ways, and I had put the residential user charge in here for Ton of Suds on 2 of the spreadsheets, so we did correct those. But, you know, as an example, Ton of Suds would see about a 70% increase in their water. You know, some of these are pretty significant. The Board of Education, ACES, and a lot of it has to do with their meter size. They have a 2-inch meter. Their volumes are such that it calculates out that they're going to see about a 266% increase in their water bill. Lafarge, roughly a 66% increase. ARMC about a 63% increase.
I was just gonna say, Rich, if you looked at that chart with the $6 for the larger customers, it is very much on there when it gives the average of 103 is skewed by that one
Yes.
with ACES that is so large, you know, for whatever reason. If you eliminated the highest and the lowest, that average, it's still, I mean, anybody who's a customer is still gonna look at it, it's almost double, but it does drop to around 93%. So it's about a 10 percentage point
You can see
drop once you take out that one, especially the one, but also the lowest.
You know, the low percentage increases are in the 60s and 70s. It's that 266.7% increase on Besser. It just happens to be
These.
where ACES, on the volumes they use and the fact of their meter size.
Rich,
Yes.
is the meter size actually the pipe size?
What it is, we have different size meters. A typical residential meter is a 3/4 or 5/8, Mike. Both, but they're below 1 inch.
Right.
And as you get larger volumes of use, you typically need to have a larger meter. So in those cases, because in the demand, the rate of surcharge is basically that the city has built the infrastructure, has the capacity out to a business or a home to be able to service that home. If that business wasn't using city water, we still need to have that capacity out there for them to be able to use it, for them to be able to have the fire suppression, for them to have the services associated with water. So what that rate of surcharge basically tries to do is establish what, you know, our cost or what our capital is to be ready to serve, to be able to have the water there for them. Typically, as those meter sizes go up, there's bigger demands, therefore there's more demands on the system to meet those. That's why when we looked at the averages, this is kind of what we looked at when we set those meter sizes. Various communities, about 31 communities that we looked at the various meter sizes, averaged them out, you know, and this just, we'll pick on the far, for lack of a better term. You know, the average for a 6-inch meter rate of surcharge is 548, and I believe we set that up at, let's see, we set that up at 500. So, but that's basically what it is we set a ready-to-serve charge based on meter size, and a capital portion for the meter size.
What percentage of homes have a 1 inch or below meter size?
I would say probably 100%. Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with the size of the pipe, it's the size of the meter.
It's
Okay.
based on the meter.
That was very confusing.
Well, you can't just put if you have a 1-inch line coming into a business or anything, I don't think you can't just put a 4-inch meter on it.
No,
I mean, so it has everything to do with the size of pipe that's coming in the building.
Yeah, it does. That's what.
But, you know, as an example.
Am I right? I
And the
don't
bigger
know.
the home and the more service you need, the bigger the pipe and the bigger the meter.
Right.
Right?
We couldn't just go into a place.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, a good example is just Tuttle Sons Laundry. They've got an 1.5 meter. They push about 238,000 gallons of water through that 1.5 meter. 1.5 meter is more than adequate. This is what kills the Besser, the Board of Education, with this 2-inch meter. They're only using 52, 28. They could get by with a residential meter there on some of those. And I mean, it's not a huge. It's $100 a month, $1,200 a year, but it still adds to the increase. You know, it's just that they've put these larger meters in at some of these businesses, whereas the Tuttle Sons is sized pretty appropriately for the use that they've got going through there.
Thank you.
Rich, you just answered the question I didn't ask, but
Yes.
could you stay on that same page?
Sure.
I was wondering, I couldn't see any correlation between your second column there, the average volume per quarter, and the last column, the percent of the increase. I see now, but in your example there of some of the bigger pipes not being used, or bigger meters not being used, wouldn't it make sense for that business to request a smaller meter to be more in line with its water usage, and therefore they would pay less, which would screw up our
But
calculation? Or is that, again, it's just one of very few,
But
that isn't gonna make that much difference?
it's not, but when you really look at it, you know, you've got 47
About $70,000.
About $70,000 is the ready-to-serve charge that's generated by the large customers.
Oh,
So even if those were all down to
it's packed
residential,
in there, yeah.
there's very minimal impact there.
Rich, I
Yeah.
have one more question.
Sure.
Then I'll try to,
No,
you can
no.
tell me to look it up after
No,
this.
no,
You would never do that.
only once.
Do we have a rule that caps what we would charge industry or a huge business with a huge meter? Is there a cap for them?
Basically, yeah, the ready-to-serve charge is capped at, would be $516.42 is the most we would charge per month for that ready-to-serve charge. Then anything above that, any other cost above that is generated by the water and sewer they use.
Don, just a question regarding meter size on some businesses. Is any of that impacted on whether they have to be suppressed? Even though that doesn't get used necessarily, does that impact meter size?
It could, because it depends on how much water they require. Some of them might use a 2 or 3 inch line, but they kind of want it, when they put suppression in a building, they really don't want it tied into paying the city water bill in case they don't, the city has to shut the water off. They still want to make sure that suppression's going.
And most of these are not suppression meters. We don't charge a bill for suppression
Oh,
meters.
okay, okay.
So we don't even require a meter on fire systems.
Oh, okay.
One more question?
Sure, no problem.
From you.
Yeah.
No, I meant,
I'll hold it
I
till
meant
later.
it's not the last question
Oh,
altogether by any means.
Oh. I noticed Alpena Township
That
is
came
not
up.
on the list of largest customers, and they are the largest, as I understand. So just because
This is just city
talks
rates.
are ongoing? Okay, okay.
Any rates with the Alpena Township are subject to negotiations. This is strictly looking at in-city customers, and the rates we charge are our customers.
Rich, is it fair to say that that could change one way or the other, depending on those negotiations?
Yeah, what you'll see is contracted sales. That's basically the revenues coming in from Alpena Township. And we kept those separated out just for that very reason, because they are unknown at this point in time. They could go up, they could go down, which would have an impact on this.
I think the study mentioned that for every certain increase in terms of the rate there, let's say with the township, it would have an impact of reducing the per 1,000 gallon rate by a certain amount as well. So obviously, if that goes up, the city rates would go down. If that went down, the city rates may have to go up. So it just depends where that goes in terms of negotiation.
I had a lot to read this weekend, so to be honest with you, I wasn't expecting to make a decision tonight, so I think
We're not asking.
I need to be educated a little bit more on this.
You didn't read through this 4 or 5 times? like Sam
No,
did?
just once.
Tom
So-
Clancy doesn't count.
So I, maybe if you could be a little bit more, if you could clarify a ready-to-serve charge, because I went into this document thinking that a ready-to-serve charge meant it would be charged to people that weren't using their water, and they would pay that rate until they started using their water. It would be but what you're saying is a ready-to-serve charge is a charge that everyone pays, that I pay, on a per 1,000 gallon.
No.
No, just on a,
Just flat.
just a flat rate, okay. So everybody pays that, so regardless of whether they use their water or not, okay. And with that system, we would no longer have the minimum 6,000 gallon.
Correct.
So what would a person, so if a person the example of the woman that I always use, because it was just hilarious, that whacked you with her bill. She doesn't want to pay for 6,000 gallons if she's not using it. So if that person if this were to be acceptable, that person would pay the minimum or the ready-to-serve charge for a resident, whichever one we end up picking, it's whatever the choices were. And then if she used 1,500 gallons, she would pay the rate of 1,500 gallons.
Let's go, and I'm gonna jump back to just the lowest one, $5 minimum bill.
Okay.
customer. Here's a residential customer. And there were the little old lady who hit Mike with her bill that uses 1,000 gallons a month, bare minimum consumption.
Is that on here?
Yes,
What you have is, that's on
right
here?
here in this column, she's going to have a monthly bill of about $26.42. Her total bill equivalent for 3 months would be $79.26. $18.54 increase, which equates to about 30.53%.
Okay.
So it's just, you know, your minimum, this is a customer who's using 3,000 gallons per quarter. And again, I had to do this per quarter to get it so I can equate it out. She would see about a 30.5% increase. Your 6,000 gallon customer, and this is the thing that falls apart with this thing. It's before, customers basically had 6,000 gallons of water free that was included in that minimum quarterly bill. So under these scenarios, and again, I'm looking at this is a $5 ready to serve charge for residential. That person would see a monthly bill of about $39.50 as opposed to $60.72. As you see, these are all fall below that minimum bill threshold before, but they would see about a 95% increase in their bill. And that's only because before they were getting the 6,000 gallons for included. Now they're paying for all water consumed. And there's no good fix to that when you're making this change. The state of the 6,000 gallons, I would, to give people 6,000 gallons, I'd have to jack that ready to serve charge up enough to cover that. And that's where these spreadsheets really came in handy, because I could plug all those different scenarios in and crunch it through. But in the 6,000 gallon per quarter scenario that I have highlighted here,
Okay.
before they were paying $60.72 a quarter, now they're gonna pay just under $40 a month.
And you can see that if you just look at all of those in that column that go from, basically where you're going from on $1,000 or 1,000 gallons per month
Correct.
on up to that, as you increase that to
The six.
to what you end up with is you can see how the percentage increase goes up. Because when you're down at the very low end, you're not using all that water that you were in essence being charged for before, but each time you add to it, you're getting a higher and higher percentage until it caps out at the 6,000, and then it begins to drop again in terms of your percentage increase as you get the larger volume. So it's that 6,000 gallon is kind of the magic line, and there's, as Rich said, there's no really good way around it. If you make it so it's works and is much more palatable for them, it's going to hit somebody else harder. So
Right.
there is no way to proportionally increase those.
It's a definite benefit though for the customers that are on the lower consumption end, which
If-
generally are the senior citizens.
Right, so if they're actually using 3,000,
Yeah.
it'd only be a 30% increase rather than
Right.
if we had left it, it would have been a 95.
And there are a lot of customers that only use 2,000 gallons a quarter. I don't know how they do it, but
Right,
they
but,
do it.
yeah,
They do it.
And obviously, like I said, they're only gonna get charged for the volume that they use. So there's no, we've had those customers that they get billed for 6, but they're using 2. And they spoke about that.
And I think for others that you see where the increases are there, the ones that are using 6, it's what we've talked about, just like with the meters go in, if that cost goes up, is they become more efficient in their water. So these numbers that you see may actually, you may see a 10% fluctuation or whatever, because people will by nature, as their costs go up, they look at how can I conserve and not use as much water. You know, you shorten the shower, you don't, run the dishwasher as often, things of this sort, so that you use less to try to control the bill. And I think we're gonna see that, that's inevitable.
And I was a little, I know it's way back on your initial, on the memo that you read. You said that the per analysis provided by Zubek operation and maintenance cost for water was $3.33 per thousand and $3.23 per thousand gallons for sewer. This was based on crediting the contracted sales of water and sewer against the operation and maintenance cost prior to performing the calculation.
Basically what they did.
I was lost in what you said.
Basically what they were doing here is, this is our operation maintenance cost, about, just rounded up to about $4 million. They were taking that $1.25 million in contracted sales from the township, subtracting that from the $4 million O&M costs, and then dividing it by the volume of water we sold to reduce that down. That was their way, that was just their way of doing the calculations, is that they took that revenue, that contracted service revenue, and subtracted it from our O&M expenses before they calculated it out.
Okay.
We didn't feel that that was appropriate in our calculations. We wanted to have true O&M costs, because that contracted sales number is so variable.
Okay.
That we want to make sure we cover our O&M and debt, no matter what happens.
Okay.
So
I just
none
got
of
that.
these calculations whatsoever have anything from the township on there at all. So instead of it being included before, now it's down at zero.
Now it's
So that's
down,
kind of taken our per thousand cost up
right.
based on that calculation.
It does get added in here to
Okay.
our total revenue stream, so that we do have it accounted for. And then we back our expenses out of that total revenue stream to figure out what we have available for capital.
But it's not included as part of the calculation for O&M charges.
Correct.
Okay, so it's
That-
only being put on the capital end.
Well,
as far
it's
as their
put in,
portion
it's
of
put in
profit.
as part of the total revenue, but we're not using it in the calculation of what our O&M charges would be. That's strictly based on what does it cost us to operate the system. That is, the two plants, the distribution system, and the collection system within the city.
Okay.
What do those cost? And then, based upon the volumes that we produce and that we treat, that's how we come up with that true cost of operation and maintenance. It doesn't matter what happens out in the township in essence.
We've put a spreadsheet, and basically, I gave you a lot of stuff to try to digest, but there's a lot of other spreadsheets that we put together. This one is what we, I assembled to basically be able to calculate what our O&M and debt costs were per thousand. And again, we looked at 2012, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, then we took the average of those to come up with what our costs, our debt, and O&M costs were.
And that, just to kind of take it back to the budget, that's in your budget in the funds for water and sewer.
Okay.
Yeah, those are
That would-
directly out of the budget.
Yeah, it would show you the detail of operating and maintenance costs.
It's just one quick
Sure.
comment and one question. Just the comment, your reports have evolved a lot in the last 7 years, so that's certainly everything, we need to know. It might take a little while to digest all that, but, you got everything covered, and I appreciate that. The only thing I didn't quite understand is we talked about, phasing in. Okay, and you have these numbers for year one. So what, for year two, say we adopted the $5, year two, is it just gonna be the same thing then?
Well,
The same $5, or are we looking to spread out that $5 over a couple of years?
is what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna just finish off the last two paragraphs of my memo, which I think will address some of those, and then, These increases will generate from approximately $1.663 million to $2.026 million, depending on the rate of serve charge. This, as stated, is far less than $3.6 million identified in the Gosling-Zubeck study as the needs for our system, but is a starting point, which will allow the city to initiate some of the needed capital improvements. At this time, we are presenting these scenarios to City Council for their review. From a capital needs standpoint, the more funding we can commit to meeting those needs, the less far behind we will lag in fulfilling those needs. While concurrently, from a ratepayer standpoint, we must make the rates such that people can still afford this essential service. It is staff's opinion that with the variables that exist in the water and sewer revenues, new meters, adjustments in the rates, changes in the billing method, and negotiations with Alpena Townships, that the income be monitored closely to ensure that we are meeting the expectations projected in the proposed rate formula. It would also be the intent that the new rate structure would not be implemented until January 1st, 2014, to allow the customers advance notice of the upcoming increases and allow United Water to prepare for monthly billing in lieu of quarterly billing. Additionally, if revenues come in as projected by the proposed rate increase, we would only implement an inflationary increase in the second year to the rates and not initiate any increases towards the needed capital funding threshold until July 2015 or January 1st, 2016. As stated, the adjustments to the variable components of the proposed rate formula has variable impacts to the large and small volume customer. Ready-to-serve charge changes will dramatically impact the lower volume customer, while increased commodity charges will impact the large volume customer more so than the low volume customer. The proposed rates are a suggested balance to that situation and can be modified as directed by City Council. So I guess what we're looking at, and Greg and I have beat each other back and forth over this thing a couple times, and the thought being is that there are so many variables in there. You know, between the new meters, between the negotiations with the township, we don't really know where this is going. But we feel that this is a starting point. If everything comes in and we're generating, and we're just going to, I'm just going to say we pick the $5 one, and we generate $1,672,000. When you think about it, that's about $800,000 for water and sewer. 1.6 is a lot of money when you start replacing sewer and water streets. It doesn't go very far, but it's a good starting point. We could live with that for a couple of years, and that's why, you know, we would try to hold this as constant, as close to where it is right now. I mean, we should be in O&M and debt for 4 years based on our calculations. So for 4 years, we're covered in our O&M. The commodity charge and the consumptions are really the variables in there. So if those stay about where we're projected, we could probably live for a couple of years without seeing additional increases. Problems are, I don't want to be that person that's recommending kicking the can down the road. So we do want to start some increases, but at the same time, citizens are going to take a pretty good bite on this one, and we got to give them a chance to catch their breath. So we're, you know, and I think the question came up. Mayor indicated he wasn't planning on making a decision tonight. And we didn't plan on that. We did not plan on anybody banging the gavel on any one of these and saying, we're going with the $6 one or the $8.21 one. This was more to present the information to the council members, put it out to the public. There is a lot of information in here. You know, I know that I spent a lot of time with the spreadsheets. I had them in good shape where I thought, the first meeting with Karen, she says, you dummy, you did this wrong. Yeah, I think so. You might have used another term in there too, but I mean, those are the things that we did. We bounced everything back and forth between each other to tried to make sure we had this as accurate as we could, to make sure we had our bases covered. But we don't expect anybody to pick a rate tonight. If council wants more scenarios, if council has another idea, if council wants to see the impacts from something, you can email myself, Greg, and we can plug that in, and we can show you exactly what those impacts are. Like I said, we took it down where we felt, at 1.6, because of the unknowns, we thought that was about as low as we wanted to go at this point in time. But, we can look at something less than that if council so directs us.
I would just certainly like obviously some more time to swallow everything you've already given us. I don't even know what my other scenarios might be at this point. A couple of questions are the water and sewer revenue, are they held separate because we charge for water and we charge for sewer? Are they kept separate as far as what we can do with them? Do we move them?
Water's one
Those-
fund and sewer is one
Sewer's
fund.
one fund.
They can be moved interchangeably.
Okay.
We do transfer some sewer,
We-
not only the last couple of
Okay,
years.
I guess I know that because I saw that.
Yeah.
They do not intermingle with the general fund.
No, we would be
But right, they
looking,
don't go outside that.
Correct.
what we were looking at is the capital fund is a capital fund for water and sewer. One year you may spend more on water capital, another year you may spend more on sewer. It would just depend upon what the needs are, is determined by basically Rich and Mike. But, so, yes, we don't have to do a 50-50 split
Okay.
amongst
Okay,
those
yeah.
each year.
Are we, with all this, I mean, this is a nice collection of data for sure. And are we still paying Zupek, or are we contracted with them? Is everything that we keep doing?
This was all done by myself in-house, and I can make all the modifications. They have basically fulfilled their obligation to us. We haven't finalized it yet because we do want to, we kept that open. We still have a payment to them, but we kept it open because we did need some additional resources from them. I did send this over to him, had him look at my spreadsheets to make sure that he didn't see something that I was glossing over in there, and he reviewed them, said everything was in order. He did make a couple suggestions on things for us to do, we're not paying them to regenerate all this data, so if you
Okay.
ask something of me, Greg, to do, we'll do that in-house.
Okay.
I have a quick question too on the debt service per 1,000. Is that calculated at current debt? Is that eventually gonna go away, or is that just something that is gonna be in debt that we figure we're gonna keep incurring and such for the bigger capital projects?
If we didn't borrow any more money, eventually it would go away. But we've got sewer and water bond issues that we took out, the SRF and DWRF about 5 years ago.
Yeah, 2000.
And those are a 20 or 25-year bond.
Plus, we have another water and sewer one.
Yeah, so,
We went by the actual debt
yeah.
Okay.
payment that we make every year.
And what we did is, these are the debt, this is the debt that we're gonna pay in 12, 13, and it varies from year to year. But we did use that and then averaged it out.
And those payments go, they fluctuate a little bit every year, maybe a little less interest, a little more principal.
Okay,
But I
But
did.
they're in there for 20 or 30 years.
all right,
If anything, there'll be more debt if we take out another bond.
okay.
And we did have, I did not include it here, I didn't want to overburden this report with that, but we did have, Karen got some bond information from our bond council, on if we wanted to bond for things, what our payments would be, so we could easily plug that in, and we could see what that increase in debt payment would be to.
And I think
take
it
on-
was 200,000 or 300,000 for, and I can't remember what we were gonna borrow,
I-
7 million.
It was actually 3 or 4 different scenarios in that, but I have that information, so if those are questions the council asks us in the future, we've got a pretty good handle on what that impact would be. Sure.
I think this is my last
No,
question.
that's okay.
And I need to have you check my numbers to see if I'm right, but when we say it's a $5 ready-to-serve charge, we really mean 10, because it's 5 for water plus 5 for sewer. With the calculations you've given us for the $5 ready-to-serve charge, that would raise 46% of the money we need every year, 46% of that 3.6 million that we need. At $5.50, it would accumulate 48% of what we need. At $6, it would be just under 50% of what we need. And the one for $8.21, I think that pushes us over the cliff, so I didn't go there. But how comfortable are you and Mike and Greg, and the staff that's kicked this around with any of those numbers? 46%, 48%, 50%?
Well,
I know.
from an engineering standpoint, though, I'd like it higher, but at the same time, I'm also,
I mean, it's real-
I'm jacking my
realistic.
water and sewer rates up here too as well.
Yeah.
So I realize that. Greg and I, like I said, we sat down and we talked, 1.5 to 1 3/4, we could get by a couple of years at that level. And if things are going well and it seems to be working, I can go into this and, under a capital commodity charge, I can put in
Magic money?
if I put in 10 cents for each one, there's about $60,000 in additional revenue it generates. But then you have to look at what that impact is on the customer. So that's exactly what I did. Was I started moving those numbers around to see where it could work.
I think what we did is, we looked at what is the minimum amount we wanted to generate for capital. That we felt anything below that was gonna just continue to perpetuate some of the problems we have. And that's where we looked at the $1.5 million to $1.75 million, and said that's really the bottom number. We certainly don't wanna go below $1.5 million of capital funds. And so that's what really dictated, and then we plugged in the different rates to see how it impacted that. And obviously, the one variable that we don't know, and we just left as a constant, is the contracted services with the township, because we don't know that. That will definitely impact. If it stays the same, our numbers are gonna be, basically what you see up there, but depending on where they go, it will also affect those.
Same thing with the trucked in waste. We've been, every year we budgeted for less trucked in waste, and it's continued. At some point, it is gonna go away, so there's $100,000 that could fall off at the drop of a hat, so to speak.
Thank you all for doing this.
Well, I give most of the kudos to Rich, who put the spreadsheets together, and we had a lot of discussions. And I think we were both kind of on the same page, but it was hard to put it all together when we had nothing to look at. And once he did that, it made the discussion and that go much smoother and much more quickly than it did. So without what Rich did, I don't think we'd be standing here tonight ready to even present what we did.
I think the additional advantage too to that readiness to serve charge is it takes out that variable where people use less water because of the high rates. You're gonna have that continuous flow of revenue coming in no matter what the consumption is. And I think that's important in planning for capital projects.
One comment out, and Matt mentioned, we're not comfortable making a decision tonight, but this information is out in the public. I don't know how it's gonna be reported on, or how people interpret it and whatnot. I guess if people understood one thing, I would want it to be this, that, to cover our operation and our maintenance and our debt, we need to charge $13.08 per 1,000 gallons. That's just covering your expenses. We charge $9.17. That would be equivalent to a restaurant, it costs them $7 a plate and they charge you $5. Sounds great for a customer, but it's a terrible business model. We have had extremely low rate, but honestly, that's a mistake. We're paying for that now, and so it's put us in this position in the first place. But I hope people understand we're undercharging what we need to function. So that gap is just getting bigger and bigger. So obviously, I don't know what we're going to do, but we need to do something. And I hope people can see that. We've just given too good of a deal, and it's catching up with it.
I can't see how anybody would think it was unfair to not pay for what you use. You don't have to pay for what you use. We all have to pay for what we use.
And I guess the other, just throw this out, even at $5, $39.50 a month for water and sewer service, I would dare say everybody's cable, cell phone, gas, electric are significantly more than they are. And it's about as essential a service as you could get.
You have to have water, you have to have sewer. I think that's one way people have to look at it.
So
Compared to some-
what would you recommend that we
Well, what-
just table? and-
Yeah, why don't we can bring it back at the next meeting again. In the meantime, if you have questions, you have ideas, either get them to Rich or myself, or send it to both of us, and we can make sure we both have it, and then we'll look at those and report back. And what we'll do is, if you do have ideas, we'll make sure that they get forwarded to all of you, so when we're bringing it forward, you'll, in essence, know that we're doing that, because we looked at this question or this proposal that you may bring forward. If we don't have anything, then it's gonna be a matter of, you have to make that tough decision of looking at what we have presented and coming up with the scenario that we need to move forward with.
Okay. I think we'll be ready to do that at some point. Thanks, guys, and I think we can expect to go to monthly billing, so if you haven't already started that, again, I know that you're starting to research some type of paying online system. I know personally I would really appreciate that.
We're looking, and I don't want to commit to anything, but.
No, that's
we are
fine, I just wanted to throw that out there.
We're looking at another scenario that we may be able to partner up and
Okay.
share billing costs with another utility.
Okay.
And be good for all parties.
Okay. But otherwise, we'll consider it tabled until the next
You don't need a
meeting.
motion.
No,
just a
no,
report, yeah.
it's just a report.
I guess the other thing is, doesn't have to be decided next meeting,
Right.
We have time to do this. We are going to take monthly billing.
Okay.
No matter what is decided, that we are looking to institute at beginning of
Okay.
starting in
So
January
we
of
would-
next year. Yeah.
Thank you, Rich and Mike and Greg.